I, Cody West, have never been particularly smart when it comes to choosing adventures. You'd think that my life experience would have taught me to steer clear of shady invitations, but nope. So, when my best friend Mark invited me to a wedding in a village called Murtyakovo, of course, I said yes. It all started with a warning sign. "Are you sure you're coming?" Mark asked over the phone. "Well, yeah. You're my friend. Are you really sure?" "Damn, Mark, now I'm not so sure. Just, if something happens, know that it's not my fault." He hung up, and that's when I realized something was off. But the tickets were already bought, my bags were packed, and the chance to drink for free. Unmissable. I was driving down a winding road in my trusty Chevrolet, which resembled an old tin can on wheels more than an actual car. At first, everything was fine, but then my GPS froze, right in the middle of the road. It blinked and displayed a message: "Signal lost. Turn back." Very funny, Google Maps. Then the radio started hissing and turned on by itself. A creepy old melody played, the kind you hear in horror movies when the killer sneaks up on the victim. And then, someone whispered my name, softly, almost inaudibly. "Cody." I slammed on the brakes. The radio crackled again and suddenly switched to a cheerful pop song. I blinked. Must have imagined it. Of course I imagined it. But when I looked at the road ahead, there was a sign: "Welcome to Murtyakovo." I immediately wanted to turn around and get the hell out of there. But no, I'm a stubborn idiot. So I kept driving. Have you ever felt like people were staring at you a little too intently, like you were a juicy steak in a room full of hungry dogs? That's exactly how the people of Murtyakovo looked at me. I drove down the main, and seemingly only, road, and the locals just stood and stared. A man in a hat, an old woman with a bucket, even a little kid with a balloon, who suddenly, without reason, popped it. And then I saw her, an old woman sitting at the entrance of a hotel. She was chewing sunflower seeds and looking at me like she had seen my fate and didn't like it. I decided to speak first. "Good evening. I'm here for Mark's wedding." She squinted. "Don't step outside after midnight." I blinked. "What?" "Don't go outside." She spat out a seed shell, turned around, and walked away. I stood there with my suitcase feeling like I should get back in my car right now. But I'm an idiot, so I went into the hotel. The hotel looked like a classic haunted house: old wooden walls, foggy windows, and a chandelier that swayed by itself, even though there was no draft. Well, maybe that was just my imagination running wild. I stepped inside and saw nothing. Absolutely no one. Usually in hotels, at the very least, a grumpy receptionist greets you with a look that says you're their personal enemy. But here, silence. I knocked on the counter. "Hey, is anyone here alive?" "More like the opposite." A voice came from the corner. I jumped, turned around and saw Mark, my best friend and the groom, who looked like he had just crawled out of a grave. "You came," he whispered, as if I was his last chance at salvation. "Well, yeah. You look like your wedding is more of a funeral." Mark glanced around nervously, as if checking if someone was listening. "Did you ever think that maybe I shouldn't have come here at all?" I rolled my eyes. "Maybe you should have said something earlier. I thought everything would be fine. But..." He swallowed hard and rubbed his neck as if there was a noose around it. "But I think someone cursed me," I snorted. "Oh, come on. That's just classic pre-wedding jitters." "No, Cody." He glanced around again and whispered, "She's here." I frowned. "Who?" "The bride in black." Great. Just what I needed. I've never been a particularly jumpy person. Sure, there were a couple of times when an unexpected tax inspector or an unknown number labeled "friend's mom" made me break into a cold sweat. but overall I kept my cool. But now my brain was blaring an emergency siren, screaming, "Run, Cody, run!" because she was standing in the doorway. Elizabeth, the bride, tall, slender, beautiful, like she had stepped right out of an old portrait. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her skin pale, her dress fitting flawlessly. But that wasn't the problem. She didn't blink. At all. You know how it's unsettling when someone doesn't blink for a minute? Now imagine being stared at by lifeless eyes, completely devoid of emotion. She entered the hotel lobby, moving so smoothly it looked like she was gliding across the floor. Almost like a doll. A slow chill crawled up my spine. Elizabeth stopped in front of me and Mark. "We are glad you're here, Cody." Her voice was quiet, too even, no hint of joy, no excitement. I swallowed hard. "So, the wedding?" She tilted her head slightly, still not blinking. "The wedding will take place." I turned to Mark, who stood frozen, looking like he was hypnotized. I decided to change the subject. "Where are the guests, the family? Isn't there supposed to be a rehearsal dinner?" Elizabeth slowly blinked. For the first time. "They are here." And at that moment I heard the floor creak. I turned my head. From the dark hallway leading to the main hall, people slowly emerged, silent, smooth, too synchronized. There were a lot of them. They just stood there, staring, in dead silence. My heart did an unfriendly somersault. "Cody, stay with us," Elizabeth suddenly said, turning back to me. I gritted my teeth. "At the wedding? Or forever?" She smiled. And damn it, her lips moved unnaturally, like a wax figure. Mark suddenly shuddered, grabbed my arm and whispered, "Cody, please don't leave me." I wasn't sure if he was asking me to stay or to take him away from here. But one thing I knew for sure. Something was terribly, horribly wrong here. And I needed to find out what kind of hellish nightmare was happening in Mertyakovo. If someone asked me what a creepy wedding looked like, I would immediately think of this moment. A crowd of emotionless people standing in the dim light. Elizabeth, who doesn't blink and speaks in an eerily steady voice. Mark, who looks like he wants to run but can't. And me, Cody West, the idiot who ignored his gut feeling and stayed. "Well, since everyone is here," I said, trying to sound cheerful, "how about we raise a toast to the happy couple?" The guests continued to stand there, staring. Oh, fantastic. Amazing. I was officially in a club of weird mannequins. Then a man in a dark suit with a stone-cold face stepped out of the shadows. "Of course. Follow me." He turned and walked toward the hall. I glanced at Mark, who swallowed hard and whispered, "Cody, I'm scared." "That's normal. I'm terrified too," I replied and followed the stranger. A long table was covered with a pristine white tablecloth, and an array of exquisite dishes was set before us. But somehow everything looked unnaturally clean. Like a display, not a wedding. I sat down next to Mark, and across from us sat Elizabeth. She slowly picked up a wine glass and said, "To us," and in perfect unison everyone else lifted their glasses and repeated, "To us." I leaned toward Mark and whispered, "Marcus, I don't want to alarm you, but I think we've been hypnotized and are about to be sacrificed." He leaned in as well. "Cody, I figured that out the moment I realized my fiancée doesn't blink." "You haven't seen her smile yet." Mark visibly paled. Meanwhile, Elizabeth was staring directly at me. "Are you nervous, Cody?" "Me?" I forced the most relaxed smile I could manage. "No, I'm absolutely thrilled. I love weddings, especially when the groom looks like a hostage and the guests look like mannequins." She smiled, and I felt chills again. But I decided that panicking wasn't my style, so I did the only thing I could do. I picked up my glass and drank. Mistake number 1, never drink in questionable places. Mistake number 2, Never drink if it's offered by a bride who doesn't blink. Mistake number 3, if after the first sip your head starts ringing and shadows blur in your vision, spit it out immediately. But it was too late. Somewhere behind me, laughter echoed, deep, hollow, as if coming from a basement. I spun around, but no one was there. The guests kept smiling, but their faces began to distort. I blinked, and then I saw it. Elizabeth's smile grew, unnaturally wide, as if her face was stretching. I jerked my gaze toward Mark. He was gone. Damn. My heart pounded wildly. I jumped to my feet. Where's Mark? Silence. Everyone just stared at me. Then Elizabeth slowly stood up. He left. Where? She tilted her head. Beyond the threshold. I felt my blood turn to ice. They had warned me about this from the start. Don't step outside after midnight. And what did Mark do? He stepped outside. I spun around and rushed toward the door, but hands grabbed me. Cold fingers tightened around my shoulders. Where are you going, Cody? Elizabeth's voice had changed. I looked up and saw her eyes, empty, black as the abyss. I froze. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, as if someone was walking toward the door. But I knew one thing for certain. Mark had left alone. So who was coming back? When you hear slow footsteps behind a door, especially in a creepy mansion in the middle of nowhere, you have 3 options. 1, play dead. 2, go full Rambo and fight. 3, panic but try to look confident. I chose the 3rd. Elizabeth didn't take her eyes off me. She stood completely still, as if waiting for something. The footsteps grew closer. Thud, thud, thud. I could hear breathing, short, raspy. Mark, I called out cautiously. Silence. And then, the door started to open. I was expecting anything, a demon, a ghost, a maniac with an axe, but not Mark stepping over the threshold, and he looked off. His suit was covered in dirt, his hands were trembling, his eyes empty, and one tiny detail, he was barefoot. Judging by the dirt on his feet, he had clearly walked through soil, but the courtyard was paved with stone. Where had he been? I shot a quick glance at Elizabeth. She was smiling. "Darling, you're back," she said softly. Mark didn't respond. He just walked in and stopped, like he was waiting for a command. I slowly stepped toward him, but then he suddenly lifted his head and locked eyes with me. Eyes that weren't his. "Did you hear them calling me, Cody?" His voice wasn't his either. A cold sweat broke out on my skin. "Who was calling you?" Mark's trembling hand pointed at the door. "The ones who stayed behind." Chills ran down my spine. I wanted to say something clever, but then I noticed another detail. A clear mark on Mark's neck. Like a rope burn. Like someone had strangled him. I flinched. "Marcus, what did they do to you?" He blinked as if waking up, looked at me and whispered, "She's lying." I knew exactly who he meant. Slowly, I turned my head and looked at Elizabeth. Her smile widened. "Mark is tired." Her voice was too soft. "You're tired too, aren't you, darling?" Mark shuddered. And for the first time in my life, I saw a man physically fighting something inside himself. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but then his hands slowly clenched into fists, and then he lunged at me. I jumped back. "Mark, what the hell are you doing?" He didn't answer. His movements were jerky, as if he was being controlled. Shit. He stepped forward. I dodged to the side, but he spun around and grabbed my arm. Cold fingers. Too cold. A freezing chill spread across my skin. "Cody, come with us." Mark's voice was unnatural, like 2 voices speaking at once, and then he tightened his grip on my wrist. Pain, like needles piercing my skin. I yanked back, trying to break free. But Mark was unbelievably strong. I turned to Elizabeth. She was watching me, unblinking. And then she spoke without moving her lips. I heard her voice inside my head. "Now you're one of us, too." Oh no. Oh hell no. I don't know where the strength came from, but I jerked away with everything I had. Mark was thrown backward. I grabbed the nearest chair and shoved it between us. "Who the hell are you people?" Elizabeth didn't blink. She simply said, "You'll find out soon." And then, all the candles in the hall went out at once, and I heard it. A whisper, software muffled, from all around. Something was coming closer. I felt breath on the back of my neck, and I realized there were 3 of us here. Me, Mark, and someone else. But I didn't want to turn around, because I knew if I looked, I wouldn't be able to look away. I stood there, gripping a wooden chair that was hardly a weapon, but felt like my only defense. The air was thick with an eerie, suffocating silence, broken only by the frantic pounding of my heart. Somewhere behind me, I could hear breathing. Raspy, slow. I didn't want to turn around, but it was getting closer. "Cody!" I flinched. The voice was inhuman. It sounded as if multiple voices were speaking at once, male and female blending into one. "Look. At me." "No. Thanks. Hard pass." But psychology is a cruel thing. When someone tells you not to look, what do? Exactly. You look. I braced myself, expecting to see something horrifying, and whipped around. There was nothing behind me. Just darkness. Fantastic. I exhaled slowly. I'm officially losing my mind. "Cody, don't move." It was Mark. I jerked, but he grabbed my shoulder, his eyes wide and wild. "You were going to look at her." "Look at who?" He glanced around as if making sure no one was listening, then whispered, "The bride in black." I blinked slowly. "Mark, I get it. Your wedding is a nightmare, the guests are weird, and your fiancé might be a robot." "She's not a robot, she's one of them." I didn't get the chance to ask them who, because, at that moment, Elizabeth stepped out of the darkness. She was staring straight at us, her face as flawless as ever, but now her smile had something too satisfied about it. "Are you afraid?" I quickly raised my hands in mock enthusiasm. "Of course not. I love creepy, mystical villages, hypnotized guests, and best friends who suddenly start speaking in riddles." Elizabeth took a step forward. "We want you to stay, Cody." A chill ran down my spine. Mark started trembling. "Don't listen to her," he rasped. "They want to take you." I spun toward him. "Mark, who are they?" His jaw clenched, his gaze flicked to the door. "We need to leave." Now Elizabeth's smile widened. "That is impossible." At that moment, every candle in the hall suddenly relit, and we saw them, the guests. They were lined up, standing perfectly still in front of us, all staring, and I knew something was wrong. "Cody," Mark whispered, "look into their eyes." I did, and I realized all their eyes were now black, empty, like Elizabeth's, like something not human. A wave of cold washed over me. "Mark!" He grabbed my hand. "Run!" And we ran. We tore down the mansion hallway like lunatics. I had no idea where this sudden panic came from, but something about the way the guests stared at us with their black, empty eyes made my brain work faster than an Olympic sprinter. "Where are we running?" I gasped, trying not to crash into a wall. "As far away from them as possible." Mark yanked me by the arm and veered into the first corridor he saw. A dull sound of footsteps echoed behind us. They were following us. No, not walking. Their movements were too smooth, as if they were gliding across the floor. I didn't want to look back, but I did. And damn it, I shouldn't have. Elizabeth stood at the end of the corridor, completely still, but her lips were moving. I couldn't hear the words, but I could feel them in my head. "You belong to us." I snapped my head forward and picked up speed. Shit, shit, shit. I muttered. "Cody, don't look back," Mark hissed. "Never. Too late." We burst into a dark room that smelled damp and, strangely, like lavender. We slammed the door shut behind us. In the darkness, I heard breathing. I froze. "Is that you breathing?" I whispered to Mark. "No." We spun around. Someone was standing in the corner of the room, a hunched figure wrapped in dark fabric. I felt my stomach twist. "What the—" The figure turned to us. The dim light from under the door illuminated her face. An old woman, pale, deeply wrinkled, with unnaturally blue eyes. "Fools." Her voice was raspy, but somehow too young. "You have stepped where you should not have come." Mark shuddered. "Baba Gloria?" I froze again. "You know her?" Mark clutched my arm. "She's a witch. Great. A village witch. Perfect." Now we had the full set. A zombie groom, hypnotized guests, a demon bride, and a witch in a closet. I swallowed nervously. Sorry, ma'am, but we really need to get out of here." "It's too late," the old woman whispered. I tensed. "Too late for what?" She slowly leaned forward. "He is already with you." I turned to Mark. Mark turned pale. "Who is?" Baba Gloria smiled. "The bride in black." I blinked. Wait, I don't get it." "Not her, fool." The old woman leaned even closer to me. "The true bride in black takes men." A cold shiver ran down my skin. "How?" She slowly lifted a finger and pointed at Mark. My stomach dropped. Mark started shaking. "No, no, no, no. You are already dead." I froze. "What?" I spun toward Mark. He was trembling like a leaf. His hands, they were cold, too cold. "No, no, no, hold on, lady." I threw up my hands. "Mark is alive. He's breathing, walking, talking." The witch shook her head. "He was taken last night." A sick feeling settled in my stomach. This is a joke, right?" Mark looked up at me. "Cody, I don't remember how I ended up outside. My blood turned to ice. I had seen his bare feet covered in dirt. I had seen the footprints on the floor. I had seen the bruise on his neck. I didn't want to understand what it meant. But now I did. Mark was dead, and I was sitting next to his shadow. Number. I jerked away from Mark, raising my hands as if I had just been caught doing something illegal. "No, no, no, that's impossible. I talked to him. He's alive." Baba Gloria, because of course the witch had to be named Gloria, anything else would have been too simple, kept looking at me with a smirk, as if I was the only idiot in the room. "You saw him, didn't you? Heard him? Touched him?" I nodded, feeling a tight knot forming in my stomach. "There's your answer." Mark trembled. "I'm not dead." Gloria shook her head. "Haven't you figured it out yet, boy? They take those who step beyond the threshold after midnight." "But I—" Mark stopped, and then he thought about it. I felt a cold wave wash over me, because he really didn't remember how he ended up outside. "But I feel normal, don't I?" he muttered, clutching his head. Baba Gloria sighed. "That's how it always is, until the bride in black comes." I tensed. "You mean Elizabeth?" Gloria shook her head. "Number, she's just the guide." I blinked. "Guide. She leads the ones who have already been taken." Mark's head shot up. "No, no, I'm here. I'm alive. I'm not—" The old woman just stared at him. "Prove it." "What?" She nodded toward the candle burning behind us. "Step forward and blow it out." I looked at Mark. Something inside me screamed, "Don't do it." But Mark was already moving. He stepped forward, approached the candle, and blew. Nothing happened. The flame didn't even flicker. A cold chill crept down my spine. Mark froze. "No!" He blew again. The flame stayed lit. My fingers gripped the arms of my chair. Mark started breathing faster. "No, no, no, no." He grabbed the candle and tried to blow it out up close. Nothing. Baba Gloria sighed. Do you see now, boy? You no longer belong to this world. I exhaled slowly. Oh shit. Mark was shaking. He turned to me sharply, his eyes full of fear. Cody, help me. I had no idea what to do, but I knew one thing. If we didn't figure this out right now, my best friend would become something we'd have to run from. I shook my head, trying to push the panic away. How do we save him? I asked, looking at Gloria. She narrowed her eyes. Save him? Yeah. Bring him back. Revive him. Get him a happy wedding instead of this nightmare. Gloria shook her head. If he steps beyond the threshold again, he'll disappear for good. I froze. So what do we do? She slowly smiled. I can help. Mark swallowed hard. How? Gloria leaned forward. You must find the bride in black. Before dawn. I flinched. And if we don't? She shrugged. Then he's done for. Mark buried his face in his hands. I rolled my eyes. Of course. A classic quest. Find the cursed bride. Save your friend. Try not to die. Gloria nodded. Just don't forget. I tensed. What? She looked straight into my eyes. If you see her, don't look at her face. A wave of cold sweat ran down my back. Why? Gloria exhaled slowly. Because if you recognize her, she'll take you too. Fantastic. Now I was definitely not getting any sleep. I turned to Mark. So, bro, ready to hunt down your killer? He swallowed nervously. Do I have a choice? Number. Then let's go. And we stepped out into the night. Night in Mertyakovo felt wrong. Have you ever noticed how even familiar things look strange at night? Trees turn into monster-like shadows, sounds take on an eerie tone, and the darkness feels alive. That's exactly how it was here. I walked beside Mark, who looked like a man realizing he was no longer entirely human. Perfect mood for a creepy midnight stroll through the village, right? Do you even know who we're looking for? I squinted into the darkness. Number. Fantastic. We passed an old well. Everything around us was empty, too quiet. The wind didn't stir the trees. No crickets, no rustling grass, no distant barking dogs. Nothing. Like the whole world was holding its breath. Mark suddenly stopped. I tensed immediately. What? He slowly lifted his hand and pointed ahead. There's someone standing there. I followed his gaze, and my stomach dropped. A figure stood on the narrow path leading to the church, draped in a long black dress. Motionless. Her face was hidden in shadow. I couldn't make out her features, but I felt her staring right at us. I clenched my fists. Is that her? Mark slowly nodded. Yes, the bride in black. I felt my heart beat slow. I had never in my life experienced such an overwhelming sense of danger. But we didn't come all this way for nothing. Ignoring every survival instinct I had, I stepped forward. Hey, you. The bride didn't move. We know who you are. Silence. I swallowed hard. Then slowly she lifted her head. Oh no, 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 no. A chill spread through my body. Her face. I knew that face. Mark suddenly grabbed my arm. Cody, don't look. But it was too late. I had already seen her, and she knew that I knew. Now she had come for me. I couldn't look away. Something held me in place. Mark yanked at my shoulder. Cody, run! I couldn't. She was staring at me from beneath the black veil, and the longer I looked, the more something inside me started to unravel. You knew me. The voice rang inside my head. I shuddered. You remember. I swallowed hard. Why? Why did it feel like I really did know her? Mark was freaking out. Damn it, Cody, move! But I couldn't. My legs were frozen to the ground, and the bride in black was getting closer. Step by step, moving unnaturally smoothly, as if floating. I felt the cold tighten around me. Then she reached out her hand, thin, pale, with long fingers. She was inches away. And then something screamed. Not me, not Mark, her. The bride in black suddenly recoiled, as if something had struck her. The air vibrated, the darkness thickened, and her figure melted into the night. I gasped and stumbled backward. I was alive. For now, Mark nearly tackled me to the ground. "Damn it, Cody, what the hell were you doing? You looked at her face." I was breathing hard. She knew me." Mark froze. "What?" I stared into the emptiness where she had just stood. "I knew her." Mark grabbed my shoulders with trembling hands. "What the hell are you talking about?" I exhaled slowly. "I don't know, but we have to find out before she comes back." We stood in complete darkness, breathing heavily. I could still feel the icy chill that had wrapped around me when the bride in black touched my mind. I knew her. But how? Mark glanced around nervously. "Is she gone?" I nodded. "I think so." He swallowed. "Cody, if you ever stare at her like that again, I swear I'll knock you out." "Thanks for the concern." I looked at the spot where she had stood. Nothing, but the air still felt heavy, as if something lingered. My foot stepped on something brittle. I picked it up, a piece of black fabric, part of her veil. A sick feeling curled in my stomach. Mark peered over my shoulder. "You're telling me that's hers?" "Looks like it." We exchanged glances. Mark was the first to break the silence. "So what now?" I unclenched my fingers and looked out into the night. "Now we find out who she is. If you think I enjoy digging through ancient records in creepy old buildings, you're dead wrong." But we had no choice. So we headed to the church archive, the only place where we might find something about the bride in black. Mark was on edge. "Listen, what if we get caught?" "By who? Zombie priests?" "You joke, but at this point I wouldn't be surprised." I picked the rusty old lock. Fine, it just fell off on its own, and we slipped inside. The archive smelled like mold, old paper, and something else. Mark froze. "Do you smell that?" I took a sniff. A scent, faint, lavender, the same as in the witch's room. A cold feeling settled in my chest. "Let's hurry." We started digging through old records. And then, Mark suddenly straightened. "Found something." He pulled out a faded, yellowed page. There was a black and white photo of a woman. I looked at it and almost dropped the paper. It was her. The bride in black. I knew her. Mark scanned the text. "Cody, this happened over 100 years ago." I tensed. "What?" Her name was Evelyn Lovelace. I felt my breath catch. Lavender. Lovelace. I realized that scent had belonged to her all along. "What happened to her?" I croaked. Mark frowned. "She married a man who didn't love her. And on their wedding night, he vanished." I froze. "Vanished? Like Mark?" Mark nodded. "And 3 days later, they found her, still in her wedding dress, at the edge of the forest." Chills ran down my spine. "And?" Mark slowly turned to me. "She was dead, but her eyes, they were still open, as if she was still looking for someone." We sat among old, moldy papers, trying to process what we had just read. In the old photograph, Evelyn Lovelace looked too alive for a dead woman. Her eyes, they stared straight through time. I tried to steady my breathing. "Okay," I gritted my teeth. "We have a name. We have a story. Now what?" Mark nervously flipped through the pages. "We need to understand why she's taking men." I looked back at the old document. There was only one short paragraph about her death. Evelyn Lovelace was found dead in the forest, cause of death unknown. The body showed no signs of decomposition for 3 days. Locals claim to have seen her near their homes at night, but of course that is impossible. A cold sweat broke out on my skin. What do they mean? The body showed no signs of decomposition. Mark swallowed. From what I can tell, she was cursed. A tight knot formed in my stomach. Why? By who? Mark flipped another page. Apparently, by her mother-in-law. I stared at him. What? Mark gave me a heavy look. Her husband was a wealthy heir, but he loved someone else. I pressed my lips together. And she killed him out of jealousy. Number, he just disappeared. I blinked. Like Mark. Mark nodded. And the bride was found in the forest. I looked at the photograph again. Evelyn didn't look angry. She looked confused, like she didn't understand what had happened to her. But now she did. Now she was searching. And now she had found me. I snapped my head up. Screw this. We need to get out of here. Mark stuffed the papers into a folder. Where? I turned toward the door. To the one person who knows more than anyone. Mark understood immediately. The witch, I nodded grimly. Yeah. We stepped out into the night, and only then did we notice something strange. The village was dead. All the houses were locked. All the windows were empty. As if the villagers knew not to go outside. Mark's voice shook. They're afraid of her. I clenched my jaw. Then let's move. Before she finds us first. We ran to the witch's house so fast I nearly lost a lung. Mark pounded on the door. Open up, old woman. Silence. I pressed my ear against the wood. Something rustled inside, and then a voice. It's too late. I jumped back. What? The door creaked open by itself. We stepped inside. The room was dark. Only a single candle dimly lit the table, cluttered with herbs and strange amulets. Baba Gloria sat in her chair. She wasn't smiling. A cold lump formed in my chest. What do you mean, old woman? She lifted her eyes. She has already chosen. Something inside me snapped. Chosen who? Gloria shifted her gaze to me. You, Mark hissed. Number no. He didn't step past the threshold. Baba Gloria nodded. He didn't, but he recognized her. I gripped the table to keep from falling. What? The old woman sighed. You saw her face, didn't you? I nodded silently. And you knew her? A tightness squeezed my chest. But I've never met her before. Gloria shook her head. You saw her in the past. I froze. How is that possible? Gloria leaned closer. She has tied you to her. Mark grabbed my arm. Cody, tell me this is bullshit. I couldn't, because I could feel her. She was close, watching, waiting. I exhaled shakily. What do we do now? Baba Gloria stared at me. Now she will come for you, and if you don't find a way to stop her, you'll be next. A cold wave washed over me. I knew that from this moment on, everything had changed. Until now, I had just been the friend of an unlucky guy named Mark, who got caught up in this wedding nightmare. But now the bride in black had chosen me. Mark swallowed nervously. Cody, the old woman's just messing with us, right? This is just some kind of mistake. I slowly turned to the witch. She was staring at me the way a doctor looks at a patient when there's nothing left to say. A mistake? I repeated quietly. You really think so? Yes. Mark grabbed my shoulders. You didn't step past the threshold. You didn't do anything. Gloria sighed. But he saw her. Mark stepped back. So what? Gloria slowly spread out old yellowed papers in front of us. When you look into the eyes of the bride in black and recognize her, she takes it as a sign. I clenched my fists. A sign of what? She leaned in closer. That you were waiting for her. Something inside me shattered. No. Yes. I closed my eyes. I remembered that moment when I saw her face. Something had clicked in my mind. Like a memory that shouldn't exist. Like I really had known her. But how? I dropped into a chair. Gloria watched me closely. Mark paced back and forth like a trapped animal. "This is insane," he shouted. "How the hell can you recognize a ghost that's been dead for 100 years? I nervously clenched my fingers. "I don't know, but I knew her." Mark froze. "How?" I couldn't answer. Because I didn't know. But the bride in black definitely knew me. And now she was coming. I took a deep breath. Okay, let's say I'm her target. Let's say she thinks I was waiting for her. Gloria nodded. Not let's say. That's exactly what she thinks. I clenched my fists. How do I stop her? She was silent for a long time. Then she pulled out an old book and opened it to a page with a drawing. A black and white sketch of a bride in a long dress, frozen at the altar. A chill crept through my body. Gloria's voice was low. "You have to finish her wedding." I choked. "What?" Mark froze. "You're telling me Cody has to marry a ghost?" Gloria nodded calmly. "Yes." Mark ran his hands through his hair. "This is the worst plan I've ever heard." I swallowed hard. "Why?" Gloria pressed her lips together. "She cannot leave until her wedding is complete." I frowned, but her groom disappeared. She traced a finger along the old records. "And now, so have you." My blood ran cold. Gloria added softly, "You are her groom now, Cody." A shiver ran through me. No. Gloria met my eyes. "Yes." Mark started pacing again. "Okay, let's think." He gripped his hair. "If Cody becomes her groom, then what?" Gloria sighed. "He has to see the ceremony through to the end." I shook my head. "You've got to be kidding me." She stared at me. "It's the only way." I stood up and started pacing. "Fine. And if I refuse?" Her answer was immediate. "Then she will take you." I stopped. Fantastic. My choices were absolutely wonderful. Either I marry a ghost or the ghost kills me. Well, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Then I said, "Where the hell do I get a ring? Have you ever bought a wedding ring?" I haven't, especially not for a ghost that wants to drag me into the afterlife. But that's exactly what we were doing. This is the worst day of my life. I sighed heavily, staring at the old jewelry box Baba Gloria had placed in front of me. Agreed. Mark looked like he also needed a session with a psychiatrist. Baba Gloria calmly lifted the lid. Inside lay an antique gold ring, tarnished, clearly past its prime, and of course etched with a disturbingly eerie pattern. A cold sensation crept over me as I reached for it. Gloria slapped my hand away. "Don't touch it," I jerked back. "Oh, of course. That makes perfect sense. Let's force me to marry a ghost, but I can't touch the ring. Because if you put it on now, it's over." I froze. "What?" She stared at me calmly. "You must only place it on her finger when you stand before her." I felt my nerves begin to unravel. So when she's about to drag me to hell, I just go, "Sweetheart, here's your ring." "Yes." I rolled my eyes. "Who even makes these rules?" Gloria sighed. "Death." Okay. Now I definitely needed a drink. I exhaled sharply and looked at Mark. "Well, bro, ready to be the best man at the most insane wedding in history?" Mark swallowed nervously. "I'm not even sure I want to witness this." "Oh, fantastic." I clapped my hands sarcastically. "Just great. I have no suit, no dress for the bride, no banquet hall, but at least I have a cursed ring." Baba Gloria chuckled softly. "She already has a dress." Chills ran down my spine. "That does not make this better." I looked at the ring again. It almost seemed to pulse with a faint glow. My head started to spin. Gloria noticed. "She can already feel you." The hairs on my neck stood on end. Mark took a nervous step back. "Cody, maybe we should just run." I gave him a tired look. And what? Wait for her to find me at a gas station. He cleared his throat. Yeah, not a great option. I ran a hand down my face. Okay, how exactly is this wedding supposed to go? Baba Gloria lifted her gaze. You must meet her at the altar. I clenched my jaw. There isn't even a church here. She flipped through the old book again and turned a page toward me, a drawing of a crumbling chapel deep in the forest. You must lead her there. My stomach twisted. And then, Gloria replied calmly, she will either disappear or take you with her. I shut my eyes. That was it. I was officially out of options. Mark and I stepped out of the witch's house. The night was even quieter. I noticed it immediately. The air felt wrong, like something was hanging in it, like she already knew I was coming. I took a deep breath and looked at Mark. Well, bro, you ready for me to marry the dead? He nodded stiffly. Yeah, just, can we skip the honeymoon? I smirked bitterly. Listen, if I survive, the first place I'm going is a bar. I'm coming with you. We headed toward the forest, toward the old chapel where it would all end. But I knew. She was waiting for me, and I still had no idea how this wedding would end. The forest felt wrong, too dark, too quiet. Every step echoed in my ears as if the air had thickened around us. Mark walked beside me, glancing around nervously. Cody, I have a question. Shoot. What if she starts doing something, really creepy? Mark, she's already dead. How much creepier can it get? Well, I don't know. Maybe her head will fall off, or she'll start hissing and crawling on the ceiling. I covered my face with my hand. Thanks, bro. I feel so much better now. Mark nodded grimly. Anytime. We turned onto an old stone path. Far ahead, the ruins of the chapel loomed in the darkness. I froze for a second. Someone was already standing at the entrance. She was waiting, tall, slender, draped in a long mourning gown. Her face was hidden beneath a veil, but I knew she was looking right at me. My legs felt heavier. Every step toward the chapel was harder. Mark whispered nervously, Cody, this is really a bad idea. Oh, really? I thought everything was going great. We stepped closer. The bride didn't move. I stopped 2 steps away. My heartbeat pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Then she spoke. You came? Her voice was quiet but deep, like it came from everywhere at once. I sucked in a breath. Yes. She slowly tilted her head. You know who I am. Something twisted inside me. Evelyn. The silence thickened. She slowly lifted a hand. A cold tingle spread over my skin as her fingers brushed my face. I have waited for you. Chills ran down my spine. Why? She leaned in closer. You were mine. I gasped. What? Evelyn went still. Mark flinched. Hey, let's not make weird declarations here. She lifted her head. We never finished our wedding. A lump formed in my throat. What do you mean? You made a promise. Something dark flickered in my mind. An image. I was holding her hand. She was smiling. A whisper. I will always be with you. I stumbled back. No. She stepped forward. You were my groom. Something inside me broke. This was impossible. Mark froze, his face pale. Cody, what the hell is she talking about? I couldn't speak because I saw it. Flashes of memories that weren't mine, but they were. I was there in another time. I stood at the altar. I was her groom. I vanished on our wedding night. She had searched for me for a century, and now she had found me. Evelyn stretched out her hand. Let's finish our wedding, my love. I froze. My fingers trembled over the ring box. Mark screamed, Cody, no! I looked at her and realized the scariest thing. I wanted to finish this wedding. My fingers hovered over the ring. A cold weight settled inside me. Evelyn was waiting. Her face was hidden beneath the dark veil, but I could feel her gaze burning through me. She had waited 100 years, and now I was supposed to finish our wedding. "Cody, don't do it." Mark's voice tore through the silence like thunder in the night. I flinched. Something snapped in my head. Damn it. What the hell was I doing? I straightened abruptly and pulled my hand away. Number Evelyn froze. The silence between us stretched thick and heavy. "What?" Her voice turned icy. I clenched my fists. "I'm not your groom." Mark grabbed my shoulder. "Yes, exactly, he's not your groom. This is a mistake." Evelyn lifted her head. The veil slipped down, and I saw her face. Damn. I went completely still. She was beautiful, not in a terrifying way, but in a way that made her face look almost too perfect. Pale skin, sharp cheekbones, and black, empty eyes. "You are mine." Her voice no longer held any softness. I stepped back. "Number." She moved forward. "You promised." "I promised nothing." "You lie." The air vibrated. A horrible screech filled the night, like nails carving into glass. Mark started backing away. "Cody, we need to run." I gritted my teeth. Number running meant giving her a chance to come after me later. I needed to end this. Right here. Right now. I took a deep breath. "Listen, Evelyn." She froze. I raised my hands, showing her I wasn't going to run. "I know you waited. I know you suffered. But this isn't right." She trembled. "We are meant to be together." "Number." Mark hissed. "Cody, why are you negotiating with a ghost?" I ignored him. "Evelyn, what if I help you?" Her pupils flickered. I realized I had touched something. She didn't want to kill. She just couldn't leave. "How?" she whispered. I pulled out the ring. Her ring. "You've been waiting to finish your wedding, right?" I collapsed onto my knees. Silence wrapped around the forest. I felt that Evelyn was gone. Mark dropped onto the ground beside me, exhausted. "Did you seriously just break up with a ghost?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Looks like it." We sat there in silence, catching our breath. Then I looked at Mark. "What now?" He shook his head. "Now? Now we get the hell out of here." I let out a long breath. "Agreed." We stumbled out of the forest, barely able to move our legs. I felt exhaustion in every bone, even though most of the work had been done by my brain and vocal cords. Mark was beside me, breathing heavily. "I don't believe it." "Believe what?" He stopped, threw his arms out, and let out a hysterical laugh. "All of this? You just refused to marry a ghost, gave her the ring, and she just disappeared?" I nodded wearily. "Yeah, pretty much." He stared at me like I had just claimed I could breathe underwater. "You literally broke up with a ghost." I smirked. "Happens." Mark groaned and collapsed onto the grass. "You know, I need serious psychological help after this." "You?" "Me. I almost married a dead woman." "Well, at least now she'll be your most unforgettable ex." I sighed. "Yeah, just hope she doesn't text me later." We laughed because honestly, what else could we do? But then, something rustled behind us. We froze. Mark slowly turned his head. "Did you hear that?" I stared into the dark forest. A whisper, barely audible. A woman's voice. "Thank you." Chills ran down my spine. Then silence. Evelyn was truly gone. Mark exhaled. "All right, let's get out of here before another ghost decides to grab me." I nodded. Agreed. We grabbed our things and walked to the car. The village looked normal, as if nothing strange had ever happened here. I stood in front of my battered old Chevy, just staring at it. "Never again." Mark zipped up his jacket and nodded. Agreed. From now on, we only stay at hotels with pools and spas. I let out a tired chuckle. We got in the car. I turned the key in the ignition, and the radio switched on by itself. I flinched. A soft, old wedding melody played through the speakers. I slowly turned to Mark. He immediately switched the station. Nope. Just nope. I stifled a nervous laugh. You know what's the worst part? What? I don't even know if I can ever get married now. Mark burst out laughing. Well, at least you can say you were married once. I started the engine and hit the gas. We drove out of Murtyakovo. The mansion, the dark forest, and the cursed old chapel faded behind us, and I hoped I'd never have to come back. But just before the village disappeared from the horizon, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, and I saw her, standing at the edge of the road, in her black dress with a calm expression. Evelyn smiled. Then she vanished. I let out a breath. Well, at least now I know how to end a relationship without drama. Mark groaned. Just drive. And we sped off into the night. Alive. At least, I hoped so.